Welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast, where we connect you with research based information that fits your family. We will talk about the realities of being a parent and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. I'm Mackenzie Johnson, parent of two littles with their own quirks, and I'm a parenting educator.
And I'm Lori Cordles, and I am a parent of three in two different life stages. They are launched, two of them are, and one is still in high school. And I'm also a parenting educator. And today we're going to continue our season on temperament and child development, all smashed together. So this week in particular, we get to talk about toddlers, which is super exciting. I love toddlers. They just I feel like it's science class 24/7 with toddlers.
Yes, and they're just like Sour Patch Kids. I'm like, what's the word? So sweet, so stormy, like
yes.
everything all at once.
Exactly. So like we shared the last couple of weeks, what we've done is we've kind of taken two seasons and brought them together. So we're taking our season 3 on our temperament traits, and we are bringing it alongside our season 5, which was all about child development. And we're going to walk through both of those seasons together and figure out how is it that temperament plays out as our children grow and develop. And like I said, we're going to specifically focus on toddlers this week. Last week, we talked about infants. So if you missed that, just go back to our blog, go back to our Facebook page and catch up on the infants. It was fun.
Yes. Good babies.
Good babies.
Good babies. And every episode this season, we're really kind of reminding everybody that parenting is a bi-directional process. So this basically means that our kids influence us and we influence them. So it's not just, I even think about conversations I have with some of my friends and like, oh, what is it? Like my oldest, or like, oh, my middle, and they think about like, why do I feel this way about that? Or why is this hard for me with them, but not the other? And a big part of that is temperament. But we have to remember that not only are we influencing our kids, but who they are, their characteristics, their temperament, their health status, their birth order, their gender identity, their all those things influence us, right? They influence us as parents too. And so the way that we parent them and guide them is influenced by our specific child. So temperament is such, we talk about like goodness of fit and creating it. And sometimes our temperaments clash because they're so similar. Sometimes they clash because they're so different. And we want to remember that that's all in the mix.
It is, which, essentially just rides right along with our whole philosophy at the Science of Parenting, which is there is more than one way to raise great kids. And that's because of this bi-directional, right? We just believe that there is more than one right way. So let's go ahead and dive right in. We just want to share with you quickly our definition of temperament that we are using is again from Mary Rothbard and her colleagues. And she talks about temperament being defined as that physiological basis for our differences. And so that internal thing, the temperament comes from the genetics of those who birthed us. And so those feelings, those genetics, that internal drive is what happens. And as parents, we can begin to predict how our children might react to their world, to their surroundings. And I love what Mary Sheedy Kursinka says. She talks about genes being the template and then our environment and who we interact with kind of allowing us the opportunity to learn and manage and practice our responses, because the basis of our responses is from our genes. And then we spend the rest of our life kind of working through what we got, right?
Yes, we navigate with them. We gain skills and all these things. And yes, so we deep dive temperament in season 3. So like, don't forget, you can catch up on that, which was a long season. We had a lot to say about it.
We did.
There's just so much good stuff. But, basically in short, Lori summed it up nicely with those little tidbits. But my takeaway from season 3 was really like, temperament helps us understand who our kids are, how they interact with the world, the patterns of behavior they're going to have. Our role is to help guide them through the world, help them build the skills that they need, and to figure out how to work with it. And like, okay, yes, we have something to do now that we know temperament, but then
Yes.
also great news, it's like cleaning off that little window to understand our kids better, and we can help predict and anticipate their behavior, which is like, anything to help me
Oh,
there.
yeah. I love that word picture. We cleaned off the window. We're wiping the
Yeah.
window, the dirt off the window as we were learning about temperament.
I
Absolutely.
stole that from you. You came
Well,
up with
you
the
didn't steal.
window,
I
and then
offered. I offered.
okay, you offered, and then I just expand a little. I remember I've taught that to people, and I'm like, oh, expand it. I'm like, the window, you're cleaning it off. You get to understand a little bit, and then you do like a temperament profile, and it gets a little bit more, and then you get the squeegee out as you
Yeah.
practice.
I
You just
love
learn,
it.
and you can see better and better.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, as we look at toddlers this week, we're really going to look at the ages, about between 1 and 3. And just like we did in season 3, we're going to use the CDC milestone tracker. So you can find that at the CDC website. It's a really cool milestone tracker. But as we think about toddlers and we think about the things that they are naturally doing as they grow, they're really starting to move much more independently, right? They might be hopping and they might be starting to hop. They're definitely climbing up things, right?
All the climbing.
Their emotions are super strong just because of their age. So, because of their age and these developmental milestones, these things that happen as they grow, we as parents are going to experience some of these things alongside with them, just like every other child. Now, we know that the
Mhm.
rate that children grow, so the rate that their milestones happen, is going to be different. But milestones are typically things that happen in every child. Additionally, there are children with diverse and special needs, and they might not have all the milestones, but again, they might be reaching those milestones at a later time. Even though they reach these milestones at different times, there's still this interaction with temperaments in them. And that's what we're going to explore.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think about the difference, like what my first 18-month-old could say, do, interact, emotionally regulate
Hmm.
versus what my other child at 18 months, could do, say, emotionally regulate.
Absolutely.
And so it does it. We know that it's going to be different rates for different kids, and temperament's a big part of that. But yeah, we do know for most toddlers, right? That in that second and into the what the first year is 0 to 1. The second year is
Yeah.
1 to 2. Okay. I was like the second and third year,
Yeah.
right?
Which year is it?
Which years in those years, in the
Yes.
toddlery years,
In the toddler years.
they're moving around a lot, right? They've really gotten much more control of their body. They're walking, they are running, hopping, like Lori said, but also their desire to interact with and explore their surroundings really increases, right? As a baby, it was a lot more limited, right? They
Mhm.
weren't mobile for a while, like they weren't crawling or anything, so it was really limited to what was directly around them. And then it was like, well, now I can crawl, or maybe I could walk a little, but it was like in a really limited thing. Well, as toddlers, they're exploring more and more. They're going to show greater independence. Sometimes even that independence comes with some defiant behavior. I was telling Lori earlier,
Sometimes.
my toddler, yeah, sometimes, my toddler's current, like, I don't like what you said, is like to do like a big dramatic crossing of his arms and like a big exhale,
Yeah.
like, mom, like, you are
Oh,
bothering me, mom.
yes.
Showing some defiance there. And it's also fun. They start to like recognize themselves more, like in pictures, in the mirror. They will imitate behavior, right? So, like, I see my toddler following his sister around,
Yes.
doing what she's up to. But they imitate a lot of behavior of adults and older kids. And then, yeah, some of the things that they're likely able to do include, recognizing the names, like they can label stuff, right? This is a dog, this is a
Mhm.
bear, this is a house. They can label that kind of those objects and familiar people. They can put together some simple sentences and phrases, and kind of start to follow some of those simpler directions, right? Like grab your shoes.
Exactly.
They're getting way better at their receptive language, which
Mhm.
they're continuing to understand more and more of what you say, even when you have a young toddler who maybe couldn't say that back to you. They a
Right.
lot
They have
of
a
the time
lot
they
more
understand
words in
more.
their head. There are a lot more words in their head than in their mouth, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So one of the theorists that we talk about when we talk about child development is Eric Erickson, and another resource that we use is Dr. Diana Lang's book. And in her book, she references Eric Erickson and his stages of child development. And I love how he puts that this stage is really about that independence. And
Yes.
what that independence is doing is setting them up for success as they grow, especially in those areas of self-esteem, self-initiative, and just that overall confidence. So as toddlers express that independence that sometimes challenges us as parents, it's helpful for us to just maybe take a step back and think, oh, good. He's getting more confident. Oh, good. This is helping her self-esteem.
Yes.
Oh, good. This initiative at 2, while it's challenging right now, is really setting them up for success.
Yes. I even think about my son is currently in the stage of like, he wants to get himself into his car seat. But it's a very long process. It's very hard for me to wait. And I'm like, I do eventually want you to be able to get yourself to climb up there yourself.
Yes.
That will be a good thing. I'll just wait the 4 minutes right now.
Yeah.
And I don't always wait the 4 minutes. Spoiler alert.
Oh, gosh.
But it's a part of that independence. And yeah, reframing it of like, you're building your skills, you're building your confidence, your initiative, and those things. But one thing that is hard about this independence is like, as parents, right? This bi-directional thing, like, how do I feel? And not just like, oh, you're growing up. Not that as much as like, do I feel safe to let you climb on those rocks? How does my temperament interact? Like my reaction when you fall down, right? And so there's actually kind of a question that I ask myself as a parent of, am I uncomfortable or are they unsafe? And so asking myself with my toddler, like, am I uncomfortable with this? Like, I'm just not, I don't know if you're ready. What will happen? And giving myself the pause to say, am I just uncomfortable because this is new or hard, or they still seem so little, or are they unsafe? And so if they're unsafe, how can I help them explore while being safe, right? So sometimes it's, okay, I will hold your hand or I will stand next to you while you try this, right? And sometimes it's setting a clear boundary of like, no, that behavior is unsafe. Instead, we can. And so boundary setting is a huge part of toddlerhood. They're figuring out, okay, now that I can explore the world, how am I going to be safe, right? And that's what we're doing as parents. We set the goals to keep them safe while allowing them to be independent and explore. Like,
absolutely. It's such a balance, right? It's such a balance of, you're doing a big boy thing and I'm not comfortable with that because you're still my baby. But balancing that with, look at that initiative and independence you're showing. And okay, I can handle this maybe for 30 seconds. Okay, now be my baby again.
Yes. Well, and I think of, the physical stuff is what comes to mind for me of like, like, okay, you're going to climb that. You want to do this. You want to explore that. But there is a lot of other kinds of exploration, like the way they interact with toys, the way, right? Like, now I'm going to put this on my head. Like, now I'm going to, and so there is some creativity and things too, that it's like, this is fun exploration. They're going to do these new things. And, but
like I said, science class 24/7, right? Always science experimenting
class.
Yes.
So let's see how temperament rolls into this, right? Like, how does temperament play out with toddlerhood?
Absolutely. So we're going to use the 9 traits from Thomas and Chess. We talked about them in season 3. We talked about them the last couple weeks. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through those 9 traits and remember that we get all 9 traits. Okay, we got them when we were little. Now we're an adult. We still have them. So our children have all 9 traits. It's just this continuum of how much did we give them of each trait? Did we give them a little or a lot? And then the idea of, okay, as toddlers, there's this normal development. Let's pile temperament on top of that and say, okay, these challenging behaviors that toddlers are giving us are actually a mix of both. And how can we gain some tips, tricks, tools, and techniques and put them in our parenting toolbox and grab them when we need them, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
You start us off.
Okay, so I'm going to start with activity level. So we're going to talk about kind of examples of how you might see this temperament trait play out with toddlers. And so for
Yes.
activity level, I initially was like, oh, Laura, you do it. I feel like I don't have a good grasp of this. Toddlers are so active. So it's hard for me to tell. And then as we talked through, I was like, oh, no, I've got some examples.
Exactly.
So I think there's actually one of my kids we have like a good family friend who has a child around the same age. And I see activity level when we go somewhere together in the stroller. Like I had a toddler, I have a very active toddler that we literally could go on like a mile walk without a stroller because she wanted to walk. And then I have a friend who has a kiddo who like, it's good. We got to bring the stroller on because they're going to get tired and they're going to get exhausted. And so that activity level of, yes, toddlers are active, but is that instinct a little more rest or a little more go, go, go? And then you also gave an example as we were chatting through of like, do you have a kid that once they get their legs under them, it's a sprint?
Yes.
Or is it like kind of a waddle of like, oh yeah, over here. Okay, back to mom and dad. Okay, sit down, snuggle, right?
Yes.
And so that activity level, we see that, and the stroller is just the example for me of like, oh, a very active kid. My daughter, we like didn't even bring it with us after like 18 months, unless we were going to like somewhere we're walking miles and miles and miles. Probably wasn't coming with us. Yeah. And that was unusual. Like other people thought we were a little crazy for that.
Right? Yes. Here comes that parental judgment. Like, what? You put that on your baby gift registry and now you're not using it?
You're not going to use it? Yeah. We did use it, just she was done with it earlier than some other kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So then I'm going to kind of do these next two a little bit together, but initially they are approach, withdrawal, and adaptability. So think about approaching or withdrawing as how do they respond in new situations? And then adaptability is their response to transitions. Now, remember, temperament becomes predictable. So can we predict whether they're going to approach new things or if they're going to withdraw and hide? So that's the continuum, right? A little or a lot, approaching, withdrawing. And so as we think about the toddler who is approaching in new situations, they might peek in the door and be like, oh, I think this looks fun. I'm on my way. Where the withdrawing toddler, they might be clinging to you. They are up in your arms, crawling up your neck. They are getting as far away from that new situation as possible. Same thing with new toys, new clothes, right? The toddler who's approaching, they're interested in that newness, while the withdrawing child is like, oh, well, that's nice. Can I have my old blanket back? And then adaptability then becomes that response or that ability to predict how they're going to react in transitions. Okay, now, just a point, like everything in a toddler's life is basically a transition. We move them from, car seat to the ground. We move them from the table to the couch. They move from the living room to the bathroom, right? So everything is a transition. So adaptability really becomes that huge key of, are they a natural planner, being that they're less
even
adaptable,
at 1 or 2.
Even at 1 or 2, right? They have their thoughts on how quickly we're going to adjust to moving into this car seat, right?
And I had planned on a blue cup.
Yeah, I planned on a blue cup. Wait.
Like, what are you doing?
What do you mean? Yeah, exactly.
This is not blue.
This is not blue. Versus a more adaptable child who, you know what, they were totally okay with the red cup. And if it wasn't even a cup, it was a bowl that they had to drink out of. Super fun. Right. And so based on just the temperament alone, think about how do they respond in new situations and then in those transitions, everyday transitions.
Yes. Those are big ones. The like what's new and what's unexpected. Is that
unexpected?
How's that make you feel?
Yeah.
Well, and a part of how strongly those feelings are expressed is one of my favorite toddler traits. Well, temperament traits too. At every age, it's one of my favorite.
Every age.
Intensity. So this is the emotional reaction and how strong it is. And so when it comes to toddlers, I tend to think of, we talk a little bit about like, we think, oh, toddlers, tantrums, right?
Yeah.
Um, but
We're gonna
so
get to
that kind of
those.
thing, yeah, we'll get to those. But thinking of intensity of your child, are they more what some might call dramatic or relaxed?
Mhm.
Like, oh, nothing is too upsetting, or I think about like when you think about your child upset, do you
Mhm.
picture screaming, crying, falling apart, or mild disappointment?
Mhm.
Because it's not that they don't experience strong feelings, but their expression, right?
Mhm.
It's just difference in how they experience them. And then the one that I think about that I'm like, this is the one. This is the one that tells you. To me, it's excitement. Like
Yes.
I think of the difference between me and my husband. I am very intense, and I'm excited. I'm like, yeah, and, kick my legs, hands in the air, kind of excitement. And his excited is like a smirk. Like
Yes.
there's a little way that he looks when he's excited about something. And so yeah, when you think about your kids being excited about something, is it a loud, excitable, like woo, or
Yes.
is it more of a more mild, like thank you? And I even think of
Mhm.
how that plays into like opening presents,
Yes.
right? Like, yeah,
Oh,
we talk about
yes.
like the novelty of approach, but the intensity of like, I'm really excited about this. Thank you. Like some kids are just that, like these Legos, yay,
Mhm.
or whatever it
Mhm.
is. But so intensity definitely has a role there. But then also sensitivity is another
Mm.
trait. And so I think of this as like how much your kids are in tune or notice the sensory experiences of like sound, sight, taste, right? And so this can relate to picky eating a little bit, right? Do they
Oof.
notice the texture of this or the taste of that?
Too
That can
hot.
be,
Too
yes,
hot,
abs
right? When
too
when Millie
hot.
poured the milk in her corn because it was too hot.
Yes, back in season 1. I still
Yes.
think about that one. I can picture that day in
Yes.
my head. But yes, and so, how much are they noticing? I actually the example that comes to mind for me for this, when my niece was, like, in this toddler age, she was always like, "Lights, lights, lights,"
Mhm.
like, everywhere we went, she'd be like, "Oh, there's the light," and it was
Mhm.
just like, what a weird little obsession to have. She was noticing, right?
Mhm.
The lights were bright. The light wasn't on. She wanted it on, right? She was noticing those kinds of sensory things around her. And then
Yes.
another one that I like to use is like a gauge is like, how does a child feel about being barefoot, like outside?
Mm.
Like,
Yes.
so like our backyard has like some rocks, some grass, some not very nice places to step, some dog poop, if I'm honest. But like some kids are like, like I need my shoes, right? It
Mhm.
really hurts me to be barefoot, or I don't like how the grass feels, or and some kids are like, oh yeah, like there's no
Uh-huh.
thought to it. And so that's another one related to sensitivity, that
Oh
sensory
gosh.
experience.
The
Hmm.
number of battles I've seen on playgrounds with parents and shoes and children
Oh,
because of sensitivity.
yes,
Ah!
yes.
All right. So distractibility and persistence, the next two. When you think about distractibility, this is really important because a more distractible child, they might get overstimulated because they're catching everything that's going on. They're noticing this toy, then that toy, this person, then that person, this truck that just rode by on the
Mm,
street, and they're noticing, and they could get easily overstimulated as a toddler. And just in general, all of that information coming in, right? We think about as adults the times that we get overstimulated. But just in general, toddlerhood being 24/7, that distractibility of noticing everything can create some overstimulated moments and maybe cause a tantrum or two, right?
for sure.
And then persistence, or then so let's go with the less distractible child. We
Don't
might
skip
think
them.
about, yeah, don't skip them, definitely not, because they might get locked in. Like,
Mm,
no, I want to go see this puppy over here that's a stranger's puppy, or no, I
mm.
want to play up here on top of the slide. I
Yes, you
want
can't pull
to.
me away with something
Right?
else.
Yeah, you
I'm
can't.
here.
Yeah, I know that trick. I know that redirection trick that you parents using guidance and discipline are trying. I don't want to be redirected, right? So they are not distracted. They get locked in. Did we did we give them with their genes a little or a lot of distractibility?
Mhm.
And then persistence, another trait, is kind of similar. And we think about that idea of a persistent child, persistent toddler is that toddler that is going to try over and over and over and over. It's like if at first you don't succeed, try again and again and again and again and
And
again,
again,
right?
and
And
again.
again, they're persistent. They're going to try it. They want to keep trying versus the toddler who is not persistent and maybe will do everything to avoid frustration at all costs.
Mm,
I
yeah.
don't want to. I don't want to climb in the car to get in my car seat. You put me in. You put my coat on.
Yes.
You do it. You put my shoe on. It's too hard and frustrating for me. I am not comfortable with these things that you're
Mhm.
wanting me to do. I don't want to be independent. Thank you very
This
much.
toy this toy is not stacking the way I want. I'm gonna go
No,
find something else.
all done. Yeah.
Mhm.
And if you think about that, even with, new toys, if they are, hard or difficult
Yeah.
because we as parents are thinking, okay, now they need the next step. They need the next level. I want them to grow and learn. And they're like,
Mm.
okay, that's too hard. I,
Mm-mm.
and my persistence level is not that persistence. I don't want to keep doing that versus the
I
child.
like yeah.
Yeah.
I would say I like my peg puzzles. I don't want
Yes.
other puzzles.
I don't want the
These ones I'm
interlocking
good
work.
at.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that can be frustrating as parents when
Mm.
on both spectrums, right?
Yes.
And with temperament, remember the things that we talked about last week, some of these traits were not frustrating as an infant at that age, but they're suddenly frustrating at the toddler age. So that's
Yeah.
really important thing to remember about temperament as well.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Okay, and then two more traits. Regularity, which still really a factor here in
Oh,
toddlerhood
yes.
because parents are still very much in charge, right? We are
Mhm.
still changing the diapers and we're still preparing the plate and all of those things. And so regularity is very much about like that eat, sleep, poop. And I tend to think if you have a toddler that is high regularity, we're still kind of on that clock. They might fit
Mhm.
naturally into the toddler schedule of like, okay, yep, we get up, we eat breakfast, we do this. Around this time, I know you're going to be tired. Around this time, I can
Mhm.
anticipate you're going to poop. And actually, my childcare provider and it's like because I have such a regular child, if my child does not, like, oh, there was no poop today. And it was like, okay, okay, we'll keep
Okay.
an eye on that. That is
Good to
unusual.
know.
But with my other, it was like, well, I don't. Whenever it happens,
Yes.
like, but yeah. So is it easy to anticipate, or is it like, well, some days, right? Some
Mhm.
days they eat a ton at breakfast
Yes.
and no snacks, and some days they eat snacks all day, and some days did they eat it all, right? And
Yeah.
so that
Oh,
irregularity, like, it's just like, well, some days I don't know.
and tied into
Yes.
that independence because they're toddlers.
Yes.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I'm independent. I'm done. I had 3
Hmm.
grapes.
Yeah.
Good
That
enough.
was plenty.
That was plenty. Yes.
Yes. And then
Ah.
finally, mood, which I feel like this one is a little more straightforward. Do you have a child that tends to be a little more sunny, chipper, or a little more somber and serious? And so
Mhm.
that can affect your ability to soothe them, right? That come, they can be a little easier to soothe when they're sunny or a little bit more difficult, need a little more help with those emotions when they're on the lower end of mood.
Exactly. And, like I mentioned before, these traits can be both positive and difficult at the same
Yes.
time. And things that we, valued as they were an infant, that, ability to not be distracted because they were sleeping better. Now as a toddler, we are like, well, can I just distract you because what you're doing is not safe? So same kid, same level of distractibility, different age.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think of that too with intensity. That's
Yes.
always the trait I go to. I just like that one. But like, as an infant, like I knew what you needed, right? Like, oh, you are crying.
Uh-huh.
You are hungry, right? Like, or you are whatever that might be. And then yeah, as a toddler, it's like, why are your tantrums like whoo? And then my friend whose child is like the exact same age, they're not really doing the tantrum thing? What is this?
uh,
Yeah.
and that
Positives
leads us
and
right
challenges.
into, yes, positive and challenges. That leads us right into our reality section, right? So
Yes.
we've talked about child development and we've talked about the traits and one thing that we really wanted to do this season, and Mackenzie's kind of alluded to that as well,
Mhm.
is we wanted to pull in some research in specific areas that might be challenging. So, okay, what is it that toddler parents might go surfing the internet for at 2 a.m.? Tantrums, right? This is kind of
Yes.
clear to us that, helping toddlers manage those big feelings at this age, because that's what the age is about. And then
Yes.
adding on temperament, like we thought, okay, let's see if we can find some research on temper tantrums and toddlers. And so one of our favorite temperament writers, Helen F. Neville, she worked with Jim Cameron and his colleagues at Kaiser Permanente. They wrote a book called Temperament Tools. Helen F. Neville and her friend, I better look at it. Diane Clark Johnson did. Sorry.
Yes. Get both
uh,
authors in there.
Get both authors in there, right? And so they wrote this book called Temperament Tools, and I love the way they break the information about temperament down into certain ages, as well as they use animals to talk about the different types of temperament clusters and traits that all go together. But what we also want you to know is that you can go to the site that Mackenzie talked about last week, preventiveoz.org or temperament.com, either of those two sites, and fill out a temperament profile, temperament survey that kind of tells you, where does my child fall on this continuum that Lori and Mackenzie keep talking about? And we'll make sure that we put access to those resources on our blog.
Oh, for sure. Yes. And so we get to dive in a little bit. And I just like to I gotta give the disclaimer that tantrums are a normal part of toddler development.
They
When I talk
are.
about toddlers, I like to talk about it as a perfect storm for hard behavior, right? Like they are starting to learn I can express myself and people can understand me,
Yeah.
right? So they're starting to learn that. Their brain also has all of this stuff in their head that they can't tell you yet, right? They
Mm-hmm.
don't have the words, like Lori said, in their head, not in their mouth. Like, so it just creates this kind of perfect storm. And they also don't have a lot of coping skills yet, right? As an infant,
Yes.
it was cry, parents fix it. Cry,
Yes.
parents fix
Yes.
it. And so they're
Yes.
learning to express those emotions and still crying, right? Toddlers still
Mm-hmm.
cry. But they're also learning new ways to express. And I mean, it's a challenge. It's normal. It's
It
okay if it's
is.
hard, but you're not oh, my child's naughty. No,
Mm-mm.
your child's a
No,
toddler.
your child's a
They're
toddler.
having, yeah, they're having a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all right to be yes, being a toddler is hard. And our role as parents, we get to say oh, this is hard for you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to help you learn some skills, right? How to cope with this, what we can do when we're mad, help you understand what is that big rush of
Oh,
that's inside of you.
yes.
You're mad.
You're
You feel
mad.
frustrated,
Yeah.
right?
Let
So
me
we help
help
them figure
you.
out, right? But we get to help them figure out more appropriate behavior, right? More
We
appropriate
do.
ways of doing things.
We do. So we're going to kind of walk through about 6, I don't know if there's steps or just 6
Things.
opportunities to think and consider, right? So
Yes.
the first one that Helen talks about is really focusing on that when and why. And that when and why is a little bit different here because that when is exactly what Mackenzie was talking about. When is the time of the age, like they are
Yeah.
toddlers. That's when temper tantrums happen. And
Hmm.
so, rest assured they're very normal because of the when right now in
Hmm.
toddlerhood. And then we look at the why. And I love how she talks about the why. And now I never considered that there were 2 types of temper tantrums until
Yeah.
reading Helen's book, Temperament Tools. And so she talks about there's 2 types of temper tantrums. And if you really think about it, I think of myself as an adult and I can see myself in these 2 definitions, right? So there might be one kind of temper tantrum that's about controlling, manipulation, control. I want to control this situation. And as a toddler, I'm gaining more independence because of my child development. And I need to let you know that I'm in charge of the situation as a toddler. I want to control it.
Yes.
So
And
she
I
talks
want
about
you to, right?
And
Like,
I
there's that
want
part of the tantrum,
you
like, I
to.
want you to
Yes.
give in or let me or give it
Yes.
back or
Yes. And I have a wish, I have a need, I have a
Mm,
want, right? I have
yes.
this want and I want you to, and I'm going to control the situation. So she talks about that as manipulative tantrums versus temper tantrums that are from an emotional level. Like, I need to release this emotional tension because I'm anxious. It's a new situation. I have run out of adaptability because I'm not adaptable in my temperament trait. I have too much energy because I'm very active. And now all of these distractions have overloaded me. And that is a temper tantrum that is emotional release. Now, I don't know about
Yes.
you, but I can think of myself and as an adult. That in me might look like a big round of tears. I
Yeah.
have had emotional releases, right? Or
Yes.
I need to just walk out the door and yell at the top of my
Mhm.
lungs. Okay, so like I
Sometimes
give my
sometimes I need to slam the door.
yeah,
Like,
just like
sometimes it's just like,
sometimes,
"Ugh," like,
oh,
right?
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so we as adults have temper tantrums.
Mhm. But
And
we've
we
learned
give
appropriate
ourselves
ways.
we have learned appropriate ways and we've given ourselves permission for those tantrums. So can't we also give that to our toddlers? Like,
Mhm.
yes, you know what? You can have an emotional release. Now let me help you figure out how to do that in an appropriate way. Yes. Oh, I
Yep.
love those two things. So I love the what kind of tantrum is it? What is
Yes.
triggering it?
Is my child
Yes.
wanting a specific thing, right? Or and I can even think of situations where it's like my child is melting down about this thing that they don't normally care about, and it's like, well, this is really emotional overwhelm, right? Like, and so
Exactly.
they heighten in each
Exactly.
other a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, but understanding that it's not always about getting their way. Sometimes it's just about these feelings are too
Yes.
big for me.
These are huge feelings. Mhm.
Yes, yes. Another one that Helen talks about is tracking the tantrums. So,
Yes.
when are they happening, right? Is it like a certain time of day that it's happening, right before something, right after something, during a transition? How often are they happening? I
Mhm.
think this is also helpful as we think about kids with special needs. This opportunity
Yes.
to track like what you feel like is a challenging behavior or a red flag potential behavior
Mhm.
that you're tracking it like, okay, how long is this happening? Like how long do they last, right? If you think about a tantrum, is it typical for a tantrum to last an hour? Is it typical for this to
Mhm.
happen 7 times a day? Is it typical for this to happen once a day? And then also the intensity level of it, right? Do I have a child
Yes.
that is and sometimes just an intense kid, not related to a diagnosis or special needs
Right.
or anything. Intense kids can bang their head on the floor, right? That is just
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
huge, overwhelming, right? But
Mhm.
and so thinking about those things for typically developing kids, like whether or not you're concerned about, like delays and things like that, but being able to
Mhm.
track it gives you a sense of the bigger picture of like, this feels like it's constant, really it's once a day, or really
Right.
it's right before lunch, or really it's it can help you figure out those triggers for these tantrums that we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. And with regular toddlers, more regular toddlers, that tracking, you probably don't even need to watch because you can think of it right off the top of your head. It's
Right
with
before
those irregular toddlers that you might really have to watch and go, "Oh my goodness. You know what? This happens every time they get hungry." And they don't get hungry the same time every day, right?
Ugh,
And
such a good
so
point.
the if you have an irregular toddler, your tracking is really going to be important. When does
Hmm.
this happen? What happened before it? Because that irregularity is going to make a huge difference in when those happen.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And you also brought up one more, and this ties right into I think item number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 4, right? Is that safety. So as they're having tantrums, because they're normal and they're toddlers, as they're having tantrums, are they safe? Are they an intense toddler who bangs their head on the floor? If they are, you just might need to sit down on the floor and slide your leg under their head, right?
Yep.
Just slide. I mean, I have a cushy leg. They can just slam their head
Yeah.
on my cushy leg. And
Like, I
then
will help you be safe. Like, I
I will
can't let
help you
you.
be safe. I will help you be
Yes.
safe. And then we need to teach them, show them what is a more appropriate way that's safer for them to get that emotional release? Do they need to stomp their feet on the ground and growl? Right? And sometimes we have to practice these things when they're not in the middle of a tantrum. Because remember,
Yes.
in the middle of the tantrum, they are in their downstairs brain, and their downstairs brain is not thinking.
It is
And
only
just
growling.
a hint, there is only growling. Toddlers' downstairs brains are bigger than their upstairs brains.
Yes.
So there's that. But we need to make sure that they're safe, and that we can create some positive, appropriate behaviors that they can see and practice ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. And then the final tip she talks about is thinking about how we can help our kids regain control, right?
Yes.
If it's, especially in that emotional overwhelm, or even if it is a kind of manipulative tantrum, that how they can handle that disappointment. Like I know you really want this and I'm saying no. How can they help regain control? And so a question that I actually ask my kids as toddlers and still use, like, do you want help or do you want space?
I love that.
And so sometimes do you want a hug? Do you want me to let you be? And so giving my child the chance to say that. And it also, I think, encourages my kids to say, like, when they need space with a toy,
Yes.
so we're trying to give some language, but other things, thinking about like what would help your child regain control. Would connection, like physical touch. Would that help your child? Would humor, right? Would that help them deal with the disappointment or the redirection? Would
Yes.
movement, right? They talk about, like, we talk about punching a pillow, or I've literally, in terms of like letting out a big feeling of release, I have invited my child to, like, do you just need to yell? Like, let's go on the front steps. Let's go outside. Use that outside voice. We can go yell. You're mad, right? Or you're just have a lot of energy, and so thinking about what is it with your specific child that can help them get back to a place where they're a little more regulated, whether, connection, space, humor, there's lots of different things we can use, but what will help your specific child?
And as toddlers, our takeaway with all this is that they're toddlers. Toddlers, by definition, have big feelings, and their big feelings are frightening to them. They need our help. And I love, there's one little section in Helen's book where she said something like her husband, or maybe we need to carry around a little card on a little sign that says temper tantrum in progress, no worries. Just to let people know that, we are reading our child's cues, and they're toddlers, and here's how we're helping them through that temper tantrum.
Oh, yes. So that is what we have for our kind of research and reality content. So now we're going to go ahead and bring in our producer, Mackenzie DeYoung, for what we call our stop, breathe, talk moment. That's our flagship parenting strategy. And so she comes in, asks us a question off the cuff, and reminds us to stop, take a breath, think intentionally about the topic at hand, and we'll see what you got for us today, Kens, huh?
I just realized I've been, typing away, so I didn't have my mic in front of me. I'm sorry about that. I was going to talk, and you were going to be able to hear me. I was going to talk, you were going to be able to not hear me, and everyone would have been okay with it.
No.
So my question today is around this idea that toddlers are a lot, right? And we know that toddlers are a lot, no matter which end of the scale they're on, for activity level, for mood, for any of these traits. So I guess my question is, as we navigate temperament in our toddlers, what do you think are the most difficult traits to navigate with toddlers as a parent, as a caregiver?
You have to go first, because I can't remember what I said when we talked earlier, because now they're all coming up in my brain.
All
of them. Go first.
Story says
okay.
all.
All 9. Well, the first thing I want to say is it depends on you as a parent, what traits you find hardest. So, like, as an intense parent myself, do I find my children's intensity like, oh yeah, I get it? Or is it like overwhelming because we're both so high? So, like, it really does depend on you as a parent. But I do think that the trait of intensity, one of my faves, in tantrums, in things like biting and hitting, because toddlers, like I said, perfect storm of like, I can't tell you yet. I don't have ways to communicate this to you in appropriate ways, like in my words. So I'm going to hit you because you made me really mad. Or I'm going to shove you because I want you to get away from my stuff. I'm going to throw this very loud tantrum because I'm disappointed and overwhelmed. And so I think intensity is one when you have a highly intense toddler that you see a lot. But another one that I think is hard for toddlers is adaptability. When you have a toddler that has lower adaptability and it's hard for them to express that to you, right? Like blue cup. I think of all the times right now that I'm trying to decode what my toddler is saying to me. And I'm just like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like I don't. And he's at the point, mine now will like repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. It only sounds like monkeys. Like it only sounds like monkeys. I don't and that's hard for our toddlers, like hard for us to not understand them.
Show me, yes.
Right. And so with that low adaptability, the disappointment of the unexpected for them can be hard.
And I think Lori, I can't remember if Lori said this before we recorded or during the recording, but everything is new to a toddler, right?
Yeah.
Everything's
all
new
new.
to a toddler.
It's all new.
They haven't lived enough life for it to be not new.
Yeah.
So I know that. So I'm obviously going to say regularity because they're growing. They want to be independent, yet we as adults want to control that eat, sleep, and poop, right? So we talked enough about that. But I also think about the parental wish of, when it comes to approaching withdrawing, I really want my child to be approaching so that everyone thinks my child is sweet. And when they come and they go, oh, hi, sweetheart, give me a hug. Or, isn't he so awesome? Like, hi, give me a high five.
Right.
And your child is not approaching, they're withdrawing, and they suddenly run back to you and they nuzzle back into you and they don't want to engage with that person. I mean, there's just that level of whether it's shame, guilt, judgment. Like as a parent, we put I don't know if it's a price tag or we put a lot of weight on our child engaging with other people socially, right? And so I think that can be hard in toddlers because if you have a withdrawing toddler, there is that level of, okay, do they think that my child is not sociable? They actually are sociable. Just right now in 5 seconds flat. And so that I think is a hard thing with toddlers because they're gaining that independence and they do know what they want.
Right.
So that's mine.
Yeah.
So
and I don't think they're like all of these traits are not like bad traits, right? There's also this beauty in like my toddler that's low approaching, Lori, you've used the term risk taker. Like my low approach toddler is probably not the kid that's like jumping off of this thing and terrifying me. Like that's not your low approach toddler probably. And so but there is like some parts of it that can be harder for parents.
So I am going to say you skipped over regularity, but I realized that what are toddlers doing? Potty training, right?
Yes.
And that can have a big role in, their regularity could probably have a big role in how that potty training goes. Because
100%.
they all have ideals on what they should be doing in their potty training and what it should look like. And holy smokes, I didn't even think about that until you said that. So that would also be something that probably is pretty tough.
The regular toddler, fairly easy to potty train.
Right.
The irregular toddler.
Persistent.
Yes. Exactly. The irregular toddler who is not persistent, I don't know when I got to go. And B, this is hard.
Right.
And if they're less sensitive, like, I didn't notice I needed to go. Sorry about it. Like, I am that way as a less sensitive adult. I'm like my husband knows to ask me, like, do we need to go? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, no.
Oh,
okay, I do need. Okay, now that I'm listening to your body, I do need to.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kens.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All that good stuff with toddlers. There's so much. Their independence is a huge part of it. Exploring daily on the go science experiments. It's a very active time, but that temperament is flowing through everything they're doing.
Yes. So, okay, next week we're going to talk about preschoolers.
Yes.
Same format. We're going to mash temperament and child development together. We're going to pull out what we think is, a challenging thing with preschoolers. And that's going to dive back into, emotions and social development and thinking about how a temperament impacts those. So, come back with us next week. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us on the Science of Parenting podcast. We know that many of you are listening on your favorite podcast app, and we would love it if you might take the opportunity to give us a rating on that podcast app. It just helps bring that app or that podcast, our podcast, up forward in the list a little bit higher.
Yes, if you've got a second and you've been enjoying it, would be a huge thing to us if you take a second to give us that 5-star rating or write a review. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So, please do come along with us as we tackle the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and the research and reality all around the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is hosted by Lori Kothals and Mackenzie Johnson, produced by Mackenzie DeYoung, with research and writing by Barbara Dunn Swanson. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.